Hey, so we're back and we're going to finish the code for the apple pie project. So let's go back to Xcode, and hopefully you were able to follow along in the first video and set up your UI, so it should look just like this. The next thing we want to do in order to have these interact with the buttons to our code, we need to set up some outlets and actions. Right now we want some outlets so we can reference the image, the buttons, and the labels. The best way to do that is to go to what is called the Assistant Editor, which when you click on this, it automatically identifies the view control class file that belongs to this view controller. If I had multiple view controllers in my storyboard, I could select a view controller object and then it would show the appropriate viewcontroller.swift file. In this case, we're kind of bunched up for space. We can kind of move this around a little bit. You can also change this down. We need to see this a little better in order to add some controls. There are a few ways to do this, and the simplest way is to press Control and then click the object and drag to our view controller Swift file. So if I hold down Control, I click the image view and I click and drag, and then notice it shows up over here, and I want to insert an outlet. So go ahead and release that, and now we'll give this a name, and we're going to call this Tree Image View. And then go ahead and click Connect. Next, I'm just looking at my notes here. Next, we want to create a connection for these labels. So we select the top label, and I press Control and I click and drag, and then notice I can select and it'll highlight right under there. I let go, and for this we're going to call this Correct Word Label. I'll press Return, it'll automatically select Connect. I want to give myself a little space so I can see where I'm going here. And then finally I select the second label and I press Control and I click and I drag and I place that here. And for this one, we're going to call this Score Label. Go ahead and click Connect. Okay, so now we have references to these objects. Next, we need to reference each of the buttons. When the button is pressed, it needs to call an action. And instead of control clicking all 26 buttons, where if we did that, you could certainly do that, but what happens is you then end up with a huge list of these outlets, and it gets difficult to manage. Because they're all buttons and they do relatively the same thing, and the only difference is the actual letter that the button represents, we can reference these as, notice let me show you. If I click and I click on a button, I drag and I let go, notice it says Insert Outlet Action or Outlet Collection. We want an outlet collection. So go ahead and let go. And notice up here at the top, we want to set this as outlet collection. So now when we say collection, we say letter buttons, and then I press Connect. So what this does is it allows us to, instead of having many of the same object connect to many instances of an outlet, we have one outlet that connects to many objects of the same kind. So these are all going to be UI buttons. So notice over here we have our little controller. If I click and drag, check this out, I can drop this on a letter, and now that letter is connected. So we're going to do this for every button. Notice when I mouse over that, it indicates which button is connected. So go ahead and do that for every button. Click this line, this indicator, and we will click and drag to each button. So again, through the magic of television and YouTube, I'm going to skip ahead. So you've already connected them, hopefully, and if you can tell, so I zoomed out a little so I could see it, and then now when I mouse over that connection, notice it highlights all of the buttons. Awesome, great job. We next need to create an action that all of these buttons can call. So we'll do the similar thing where we press Control and we select the button and then we click and drag and we let go. Now over here, I'm going to release and I want to create an action. So select action, and this time we need to make sure that we change the type to UI button because we want to be able to guarantee that everything that calls this is a button. And we're going to call the method name is button pressed. And go ahead and press and connect there. Now, guess what? We get to connect all of these buttons to this action. So let's go ahead and do that and we'll skip ahead. Okay, so that was a lot of fun, huh? So if you mouse over the action connection, then you'll notice that it's connected to all of those buttons. Very good. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, why would we want to do this? This is real tedious. We got all these buttons, they're all the same except for the label. What's another way to do that? Well, you could programmatically create and add the button to these view stacks so that instead of having them and manually setting it up, you could do it in code. Well, I'm not going to show you to do that right now because this is based on the app development with Swift book, and this is the way they want to do it. So at another time, we'll go through this type of exercise where we can reduce the repetitiveness of these kinds of manual things and actually do it in code so that we can write the code and we can have any number of grid items and have as many view stacks as we need to do it. But that's a little more involved, and so we'll have to look at that another time. When we press this button, we're going to call this method, and in order to, one of the steps that we need to do, let's give ourselves a little more space. We want to disable the button once you've selected it, because once you've chosen a letter, then you can't choose that letter again. So because we created the action and the type is of UI button, we can guarantee that when we reference sender, we can call this method and we can say is enabled and then equals false. So when you press a button, we are now telling that button that was pressed to be disabled by setting is enabled to false. All right, let's run this and see how it looks. Let's go to the top here and select our target, and then we want to choose an iPad. And notice because we had set this to iPad only, the simulator options are only iPads. So we'll go ahead and run that. So here we have the simulator running, and notice that because we used these view stacks, we can run this in both portrait and landscape. If I have the simulator selected and I press Command and then the left or right arrow key, I can rotate the device. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Okay, let's go ahead and test that our buttons are being disabled when we press them. Check it out. Look at that. See how they're disabled, so they've changed to this gray and I can't press them again. Perfect. Okay, let's go back to Xcode and press stop. Let's go, now we're done with the storyboard. We've set up all of our connections. We can, we no longer need to work in this view. So let's go to the view controller and let's go back to our main view. We don't need the assistant editor, we just want the main text view. All right, so we are creating a game, and in this game we are choosing letters and we are taking turns. So we need to create some variables in order to track our list of words and then also track the number of moves that have been taken. So within our view controller class, I'm going to place these variables. I just like to put them with the other outlet variables, but also above any of our methods that we're calling, any of our functions. So let's go ahead and say var list of words equals, we're going to use an array literal, which means that we have the square bracket and then we have an array of strings. So the words are going to be, and I'm just going from the book, Buccaneer, and then Swift, Glorious, make sure I spell it right, incandescent bug, and whoops, typing what I speak, and program. Okay, so what this does is it creates an array of words that we're going to choose, and you of course can change. You can set this to whatever you want. If you're writing the app for children, I don't think they're going to get incandescent, but maybe your kids are smarter than mine. I don't know. Next, we need a variable that we want to determine how many turns they've taken, because after a certain number of guesses, if you've guessed wrong, then the game is over. So we're going to call this let, because we're not going to change this. It's going to say incorrect moves allowed. We're going to set that to 7. Next, we need to define how many times they've won and how many times they've lost. So we're going to create a couple of variables. We're going to say var total wins and set that to 0, and var total losses and set that to 0. So these are variables that are going to change, so that's why we use the var. As opposed to incorrect moves allowed is a constant. It's not going to change, so we use the let keyword. Okay, next, when the app loads, we need to create and start our new round. So the best place to do that is in the viewDidLoad method. In this method, we're going to call a new round, and we're going to create a function for that. So the name of it is going to be called new round. And so let's go here, and below we're going to indicate func and we're going to call this new round. Okay. So when we have a new round, we need to know where we are within the game. And we want to reset some values. We want to choose a word, and then we want to reset the number of moves that they've already taken. And in order to do that, we want to use a struct for the game state. So let's add a new file. If I click over here in this folder where it says apple pie, and I right click and I say new file, then I want a Swift file, which is kind of the default, and then choose next, and we're going to call this game. Go ahead and click create, and in this file we're going to create a struct, and we're going to say struct game, and we're going to have two variables. We're going to have var word, which is a string type, and then var incorrect moves remaining, and this is going to be an int type. Okay, go ahead and save that, and let's go back to our view controller. Now, when we call new round, we need to update and set the state of the game. In order to track the state of the game, we want to create another variable that will hold this game struct. So we're going to say var current game, which is of a game type, and then we use an exclamation point. In our new round, we need to initialize this and give it a word and set the incorrect moves remaining. So to do that, let's go ahead and say let new word equal list of words, and we're going to say dot remove first. What this does is it takes the first element in the array and it removes it from the array and it assigns it to this new word. Then we're going to say current game equals, and we're going to call this a game, and it's going to be word is going to be new word, and incorrect moves remaining is going to be incorrect moves allowed. Okay. You may be wondering, why does the variable current game have an exclamation point? What this does is it tells the compiler that it's okay if this variable doesn't have an initial value. The reason for that is that when the view did load is called, all of these variables are initialized. Because we don't know the current game object, we don't want to initialize it yet until it's needed. And so it gets initialized after view did load is called, which then calls new round. Next, we need to initialize the UI so that when we create a new round, we update the UI labels to indicate the score, current score, and lives remaining. So in our new round method, we're going to call another method called update UI. Let's go ahead and create that. And we type func update UI. And from here, we need to set the label text, and we need to set the UI image view, the initial image view, to the correct values. So we're going to say score label dot text equals, and we're going to say wins, and then we'll reference the variable. And so we do string interpolation, which references the variable we're going to call total wins. So remember, use the backslash and then opening, closing parentheses. Wins, comma, losses, and then we use backslash, open parenthesis, and we're going to say total losses, and then closing parenthesis, and then the closing quote. Next, we're going to update the tree image view. We're going to say tree image view dot image equals, and in this case, we want to indicate we're going to reference UI image to call what is called image named. So we say UI image, and then opening parentheses named, and it asks for a string. And the string we're going to use is tree, and then I use the backslash, and we're going to use a variable. The variable is going to be the current game dot incorrect. Whoops, make sure I spell this right. Incorrect moves remaining, and then close parentheses. Okay, so what this does is we are calling the image view. We're setting the first image to be tree, and then it's either 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 6, because notice if I go back to my assets folder, 6 or 7, so we have all these images. And so when I go to set the image, we're saying whatever the current game dot incorrect moves remaining number is, that's going to be the image name that we want to load. Total wins, yeah, I guess I could spell this right. Total wins, very good. Okay, in the next video we will conclude the code for this project. So go ahead and be sure to subscribe and like and comment. If you have any questions about what we've done so far, I'll try to answer them, or other people can help answer them as well. Thanks for watching.